The film commences with a man named Bone, incarcerated in prison. There, he attracts the attention of a group of troublemaking inmates who aim to target him. To their surprise, Bone reveals himself to be a skilled martial artist, swiftly subduing them. After years behind bars, Bone is finally released and heads to Los Angeles. He finds accommodation in an apartment owned by a woman named Tamara. Tamara advises him to behave impeccably while residing there and lays down some important rules. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to underground fights organized by a man named James, who leads a gang. James has a formidable fighter named Hammerman, known for his undefeated record and aggressive fighting style. That night, Hammerman faces off against a fighter backed by a local fight promoter named Pinball. However, Pinball's fighter proves to be no match for Hammerman. The powerful Hammerman easily defeats him, to the extent that he could have been seriously injured if Pinball hadn't intervened. Since Pinball lost the bet, he reluctantly hands over the money to the intimidating James. Upon returning to his car, Pinball is astonished to find Bone waiting for him. Bone asks Pinball to train him as an underground fighter so he can challenge Hammerman. Initially hesitant, Pinball is reluctant to risk his money on someone he doesn't know. However, Bone manages to persuade him with an enticing offer, promising to make it worth Pinball's while if he takes him on. They head to the fighting arena, where Bone encounters James and his girlfriend Angela. James mistakenly believes that Bone is interested in Angela, and warns him to stay away from her. Without delay, Pinball arranges Bone's inaugural fight against a formidable opponent. To everyone's surprise, Bone completely dominates the match, taking down his adversary with just 2 kicks. Impressed by Bone's skills, Pinball decides to become his promoter. Bone agrees, but his primary goal is to face off against Hammerman. He also inquires about Angela, prompting Pinball to share a tragic tale. Angela was previously married, but James framed her husband for a triple murder and sent him to prison. When James discovered that Angela was pregnant, he coerced her into having an abortion. Since then, and with addiction and unable to escape from James. Later, we witness James having a conversation with his business partner, revealing his ruthless and mafia-like nature. He doesn't hesitate to eliminate his partner simply because the man said something he didn't like. The following day, Bone strikes up a friendship with Roberto, an elderly resident of the same apartment building. They spend a lot of time together playing chess and bonding. Bone also forms a good rapport with Jared, the young boy Tamara adopted. That evening, Pinball returns and takes Bone to a fight where he has to face multiple opponents simultaneously. It's a mission to get back at a shady promoter who cheated them. To everyone's amazement, Bone excels and rises to fame in the underground fighting scene, defeating every opponent in his path and accumulating substantial earnings for both himself and Pinball. Despite the newfound fame, Bone remains grounded and dedicates himself to rigorous training every day to become an even better fighter. One evening, he returns to his apartment with some injuries, prompting Tamara to express concern and care for him. She is also worried about Jared, who has been feeling down lately. In response, Bone decides to lift Jared's spirits by teaching him some basic martial arts moves. Meanwhile, James unveils his true merciless nature once again, committing a heinous act by taking the life of a woman in an alley. This time, Roberto, who happened to be passing by the area, witnesses the gruesome act. In short, Bone finally seizes the opportunity to face off against Hammerman, and to everyone's surprise, he effortlessly takes down the formidable opponent without sustaining any injuries. This leaves James in utter astonishment. James hands over the bet money to Pinball and extends an invitation for Bone and Pinball to join him for dinner. As it turns out, James desires Bone to become the main fighter in an international underground fighting group known as the Consortium, where influential and affluent individuals are involved. He wants Bone to challenge the reigning champion, Pretty Boy Price. However, Bone is uncertain and requests some time to contemplate the offer. In a private conversation, James urges Angela, his girlfriend, to sway Bone's decision through seduction. During their discussion, Bone discloses that he was incarcerated with Angela's late husband, Danny, who was executed on James' orders. Following Danny's demise, Bone made a pledge to liberate Angela from James' control. Angela confides that she had a son after Danny's imprisonment, but lost custody of him and is now unaware of his whereabouts. Bone assures her that he knows where her son is and pledges to reunite them. Nevertheless, Angela must overcome her addiction before regaining custody of her son. They devise a plan, and Bone informs James that he will reconsider the offer on the condition that he takes Angela away that very night. Bone escorts Angela to a drug rehabilitation center. The next day, James approaches a formidable mobster named Franklin McVeigh and offers him $5 million to secure the consortium's approval and arrange a fight between Bone and Price. That evening, Bone receives distressing news. Roberto, the elderly man from their apartment building, was brutally murdered right in front of their residence. James' henchmen were responsible, as Roberto had witnessed one of James' previous killings. Tamara is deeply affected by Roberto's death, and Bone endeavors to console her. Meanwhile, Hammerman goes on a rampage at a bar, attacking Pinball in an attempt to ascertain Bone's whereabouts. He seeks revenge, and Pinball is perilously close to being overpowered. Fortunately, Bone arrives just in the nick of time to rescue him. Ultimately, Bone declines James' offer to become his fighter. This infuriates James, who commands his gang to pursue Bone and Pinball. Additionally, James dispatches his enforcers to the drug rehab clinic to locate Angela. However, Bone had already relocated her to a secure location, making them unable to find her. Instead, they confront Bone at the clinic, but he skillfully defeats them one by one. Subsequently, James contacts Bone and instructs him to come to the McVeigh residence. He demands that Bone face Price in a fight to reclaim the money, threatening harm to Angela, Tamara, Jared, and Pinball if he refuses. Prior to the showdown, Bone reveals that he was exceptionally close friends with Danny and seeks to avenge Danny's tragic demise by bringing James to justice and liberating Danny's wife and son from his malevolent grasp. Astonishingly, James confesses to all the malevolent acts he perpetrated, including framing and harming Danny, ultimately ordering his murder while incarcerated. Unbeknownst to James, Bone discreetly recorded his confession using a GPS-enabled phone and sent the incriminating evidence to Pinball's phone. Pinball promptly forwards the video to the police. Shortly thereafter, Pretty Boy Price arrives, heralding the highly anticipated battle that everyone has been awaiting. Bone and Price are both formidable fighters, showcasing their extraordinary skills in an intense showdown. Bone skillfully traps Price, rendering him immobile. However, just as Bone is on the brink of victory, Price concedes, acknowledging defeat, thus making Price the victor due to Bone's relaxed approach, allowing himself to lose. Enraged, James launches an assault on Bone with a katana. Upon witnessing this, McVeigh instructs his guards to provide Bone with a katana to even the odds. However, Bone opts not to wield the sword and instead fights with the sheath alone. He easily overpowers James in the midst of chaos. Bone wields the sword, and in a twist of fate, James ends up severing his own hand. Bone manages to evade capture before the police arrive at the meeting at the Fame Mansion to apprehend James. A few days later, Angela visits the apartment building where Bone resides, and a heartwarming revelation unfolds. It turns out that Jared, Angela's son, was born while her husband was in prison. Angela is overjoyed to reunite with her son, now that she has overcome her drug addiction. Tamara, who had once threatened to evict Bone due to his association with James, has a change of heart. She extends an offer for Bone to stay in her apartment, but he graciously declines, recognizing the potential for further complications. Before departing, Bone hands Tamara an envelope filled with cash and entrusts her with the care of Angela once she is fully recovered. He bids farewell to Pinball, mentioning that he has some business to attend to. During the end credits, McVeigh dispatches JC and his gang to deal with James in prison. Thank you for staying till the end. Your support on my channel would mean a lot. As always, catch you in the next one.